I stared at the severance package she had slid across the table as casually as if it were the dessert menu. 20 years of dedication at Raymore Publishing reduced to a manila envelope. Sarah, after 20 years, we're going with younger talent, Monica announced between bites of her grilled salmon. The restaurant bustled around us, unaware of my world. I said, I wish you all the best, in a voice that was surprisingly steady. I even managed to smile. Monica appeared momentarily surprised by my poise. She had anticipated tears, possibly pleading, but she was unaware that I had been predicting this for months, ever since she had been appointed as the new director and began packing the office with recent graduates who were hardly old enough to recall physical books. My name is Sarah Ellison, and I am 56 years old. I have worked as the Senior Client Relations Manager at Raymore Publishing in Boston, Massachusetts, for the past 20 years. I am not particularly flamboyant or gregarious, but I am reliable, meticulous, and sincerely concerned about our clients and their work. Publishing relationships are crucial, and I have established strong ones with some of our most renowned authors and corporate clients. The industry is evolving, and Sarah Monica kept pushing her plate away. She was 34 years old, dressed in designer clothes, and had little experience in publishing. We need new ideas from people who know how to use digital platforms and social media. Of course, I nodded. Times are changing. Napkin was obviously relieved that I wasn't making a scene. Human Resources will get in touch with you regarding your benefits. Your severance is a substantial 6-month salary. We value your years of service as though I had been a utility rather than the mainstay of client retention. I took a sip of my iced tea and considered my next course of action, as my daughter had graduated from college and my mortgage was almost paid off. I was able to weather this storm for a while last year since I had funds and my husband Thomas's work as an architect was financially secure. Are you okay? I answered simply, I understand business decisions need to be made, as Monica questioned, her brow furrowing slightly. As we made our way back to the Monica was talking about her plans to reorganize my department at work when my phone buzzed with a text from Harold Baldwin, CEO of Baldwin Tech, one of our biggest clients. We had to discuss the new marketing strategy for the Tech Manual series at lunch tomorrow, but Monica had no idea that 3 of Raymore's biggest clients, not the companies, were waiting for me. I started working with Raymore Publishing in 2003 and after 10 years in customer service positions, I decided to become an administrative assistant. I had studied English literature and had aspirations of becoming a teacher, but I needed flexible hours to raise my daughter. What began as a temporary job turned into a career I truly loved over the course of those 20 years. As I worked my way up from answering phones to this wasn't a strategy, it was just who I was. Baldwin Tech had been with Raymore for 15 years. Because of my attention to detail, and I knew the favorite coffee order of every author we published, as well as the names of their spouses, children's birthdays, and preferred hotels when they visited Boston. Baldwin, the company's founder, trusted me implicitly with their training materials and technical manuals. Harlow Imports had signed with us 7 years ago after I courted them for 18 months. And New Summit Holdings had been our client for almost 10 years. Together, these 3 clients accounted for nearly 40% of Raymore's yearly revenue, but Monica viewed me as an elderly relic occupying space that could have been occupied by a younger person. When we got back to the office, Richard, the guard, who had watched me enter the building every morning for the previous 12 years, looked uneasy. I apologize for this, Miss Ellison, he whispered as Monica moved aside to take a break. Richard was the publishing partner who made sure their materials were flawless, on time, and exactly what they had envisioned. Security was indeed waiting. My coworkers watched in stunned silence as I packed my personal belongings into a cardboard box, including family photos, my collection of fountain pens, and the small jade plant I'd kept alive since my first day. Some looked away in embarrassment, while others approached with whispered promises to stay in touch. It's okay, Richard, I reassured him. Just doing your job, who had joined the company 5 years prior, appeared especially upset. This isn't right, she hissed as she assisted me in packing my books. Everyone knows that you're the reason half of our major clients remain with us. I squeezed her hand, and as Jessica's company changed, I asked, "What will you do?" I smiled, the first sincere one since lunch, and Richard escorted me to the with my elevator box in hand. I saw Monica talking animatedly to the young woman I thought would take my place. She appeared to be about 25, full of energy, and eager to prove herself. I didn't blame her, this was her chance, just as Raymore had been mine. However, Monica didn't understand that opportunities could work both ways, so on the way home, I gave myself 15 minutes of grief that I had earned for 20 years. Thomas was working from home that day, designing renovations for a historic building downtown, when he noticed me enter the house. At the very least, I thought about the authors whose books I had helped bring to life, the relationships I had fostered, and the innumerable late nights spent making sure deadlines were met. Then I pulled into my driveway, took a deep breath, and locked those feelings away. He asked, "They finally did it," as soon as he got the cardboard box at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I nodded and put the box down. Monica took me to lunch, it seems they're going with younger talent. After 30 years of marriage, Thomas pulled me into an embrace. He knew when I needed space and when I needed comfort. "Their loss," he said simply. "Maybe," I replied, pulling back to look at him, "but possibly my gain." That evening I made 3 phone calls, not to lament my situation but to set a new course. The first was to Harold Baldwin. We had developed a friendship over the years that extended beyond our professional relationship. He had even attended my daughter's wedding last summer. "They did what?" "I understand business decisions, Harold, but this isn't business. It's short-sightedness." He said firmly, "Let's meet tomorrow, I have some thoughts." "Sarah, you're the only reason we've stayed with Raymore all these years. Their production quality is good, but without you managing the process," he said, trailing off. My third call was to Robert Summers at New Summit Holdings, who is the most reserved of the 3. His response surprised me the most with its timing. My second call was to Victoria Harlow, CEO of Harlow Imports. Her response was similar to Harold's incredulity, followed by calculation. "We have 3 projects scheduled with Raynor this quarter," she said, "but our contract renewal is coming up next month, so let's talk before I sign anything." By the time I went to bed that night, I had lunch meetings with all 3 clients scheduled for the next 3 days. I wasn't planning retaliation, I was just exploring. He said, "We've actually been considering bringing our publishing in-house, but we just weren't sure how to manage the workflow." He paused, asking if Sarah would be open to discussing opportunities, not just for our current projects, but possibly something more permanent. Options that were unexpectedly made available to me the next morning. I woke up feeling more clear-headed than I had in years. Jessica had slipped me a USB drive with my contact lists and project templates on it while I was packing my office. It contained nothing proprietary or confidential, just the tools I had developed during my time there. "You built these," she had whispered, "they're yours." As I got ready for my lunch with Harold, I realized that Monica had really done me a favor by forcing me to think about options I never would have otherwise considered. I didn't have to start from scratch because I had 20 years of experience, a large network, and now the freedom to reimagine my professional identity. The following day, I arrived at I had purposefully chosen Grenell's Bistro 15 minutes early for my lunch with Harold because it was only 2 blocks from Raynor's offices and Monica regularly held client meetings here. A small, selfish part of me hoped she would see me with Harold, but the strategic part knew that the best retaliation was to appear confident and in demand. Harold arrived on time at noon, his massive 6 feet 4 inches frame drawing attention. Harold greeted me warmly and said, "You look well for someone who just had their career unceremoniously upended. I've always believed in looking forward, not back." As we sat down after ordering, Harold leaned forward before we discussed your situation. At 62, he was still working 14-hour days and expected everyone around him to match his energy. "I have news," Monica called me this morning. I raised an eyebrow, but I wasn't shocked. She said she was the new director of client relations and wanted to set up a meeting to discuss our future goals. I couldn't help but smile when she said that they had assigned someone named Bethany to our account and that she had innovative. Harold's eyebrows shot up when I mentioned that Bethany Wilson, a smart girl with a marketing degree from NYU, had been with Raynor for 8 months and had never worked on technical publications. I make it my mission to know everyone who could have an impact on my clients. I said that our food had arrived, and Harold waited until I nodded, having negotiated that contract myself last year, and I have no intention of working with someone who doesn't understand our materials, Harold. The server had left before continuing. Sarah Baldwin Tech has 3 textbooks, 5 technical manuals, and our entire training curriculum scheduled with Raynor this year. The contract is worth about $2 million. Went on, but I also can't afford production delays because our new engineering program starts in September. I know what I mean when I say that I feel a little bit of loyalty to Raynor despite everything. But the production team there is great. Harold waved his hand dismissively, saying that the production team follows your project plan, Sarah, which you created, including the style guidelines, workflows, and quality. We'll continue to use Raynor for production, at least for the time being, but you'll be our representative and handle everything as you always have. You're the one who knows what we need, so he paused. So, here's my proposal. I want to hire you as a consultant to manage our publishing projects. I almost choked on my water, so you want to hire me directly. Raymore's thoughts were racing when Harold interrupted, saying, I appreciate the offer, but Raymore might see that as I don't care how Raymore sees it. They're the ones who decided you were expendable, and I'm just responding to market conditions. Harold grinned, and as I thought about Harold's offer, my phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. I'm excited to talk to you and am not impressed with Harlow's preparation for our meeting with the new Raynor representative tomorrow. However, another text message from Robert Summers Raynor called a new person who is unaware of our specific formatting requirements, which are still in effect. For Thursday. I looked up at Harold, who was observing me with a knowing gaze. Raymore said, the realization of what was happening and what could happen next was both thrilling and terrifying. I had never intended to compete with my former employer, but they had set these events in motion. Now I had a choice to make. I told Harold, let me think about your offer, and let's see what Victoria and Robert have to say. It appears that I'm not the only one who is having second thoughts about Raymore's new direction. Say. The next day, I met Victoria Harlow at her office in a refurbished textile mill with a view of the Charles River. Harlow Imports specialized in European home furnishings and produced intricate seasonal catalogs and design books that demanded exacting attention to detail. I just had the most annoying phone conversation with someone named when I first sat down. Bethany Victoria told me that she couldn't tell me if they could match the paper quality we used last season and that she didn't know about our color calibration requirements. Those are production details. I said tactfully that since Bethany has a marketing background, she might still be learning the technical aspects. Victoria gave me a pointed look, Sarah, and you and I both know that. And when you called Victoria, she slid a folder across her desk, and inside was a proposal similar to Harold's, a consulting contract for me to manage Harlow's publishing projects with a compensation package that made my eyes widen. The technical aspects of publishing are everything. Our catalog is sent to interior designers who can see a half-shade difference in color from across the room. I had our legal team draft this. Bringing more control in-house has been something we've been thinking about for a while, and this seems like the ideal opportunity. I closed the folder feeling both flattered and overwhelmed. Victoria. Of course, she nodded, but I wanted you to know that there are options that value your expertise. I should probably not be telling you this, but things are crazy here. Baldwin Tech is threatening to halt their projects, and Harlow Imports is suddenly demanding that I personally approve every stage of production. I tried to sound neutral when I answered the phone unexpectedly that evening from Jessica Adams, my former coworker at Raymore. Sarah. Jessica added that it's a disaster and that Bethany is totally overwhelmed. She sobbed for an hour in the restroom today after Robert Summers destroyed her production schedule for the training manuals for new summits. I apologize for what I said, but I genuinely feel sorry for Bethany. Monica called an emergency meeting. The executive team looks worried, and I think they're finally realizing what they've lost, Jessica added for tomorrow morning. When Thomas entered and put a cup of tea at my elbow, I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the 2 contract offers before him. "What's going through that brilliant mind of yours?" he asked, sitting next to me. "I'm considering my options," I said. "I've been offered consulting contracts by both Harold and Victoria, and if Robert does the same tomorrow." Thomas took my hand. "Sarah, I've watched you prioritize Raynor's needs over your own for 20 years. You've worked weekends, answered calls during our vacations, and stayed up late to meet impossible deadlines. You deserve this opportunity," but I shook my head when I started my own consulting business at 56. Riskier than putting your trust in a company that dumped you after 20 years of loyalty, he retorted. Of course, when I woke up the following morning, I had already made up my mind, so I called Harold and Victoria to accept their offers with the caveat that I wanted to wait until after my meeting with Robert Summers before making any final decisions. As I got ready I was hoping we could meet to discuss some ongoing projects, but it seems there are some transition issues we didn't anticipate. "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied calmly, "but I'm afraid I'm booked with meetings for the next few days." Sarah's voice started off unusually conciliatory. "Desperation, this is crucial. Baldwin and Harlow are making irrational demands, and we could really use your insight." I couldn't help but laugh when I said this because I thought you were seeking new viewpoints. There was a long silence before Monica spoke again, so maybe we moved too quickly. "I met with Robert Summers at New Summit's headquarters in a meeting to discuss the possibility of bringing you back as a consultant during this transition period. There, I received an indirect acknowledgement that they had made a mistake, which should have felt like victory, but instead I felt only clarity. I said, I'll check my calendar and get back to you, and ended the call. Shimmering downtown skyscraper. But in contrast to Harold's friendliness or Victoria's bluntness, Robert was calculating and exact, which made his proposal all the more unexpected. "After initial pleasantries, we want to bring you on as our Director of Publishing Operations," he said. "Sarah, we don't want to hire you as a consultant." I blinked as I tried to comprehend. "We publish over 30 training manuals, corporate reports, and marketing materials annually, and we've been contracting with Raymore because we didn't have someone with your expertise in-house. Now that you're available," he trailed off meaningfully. "I'm flattered, Robert, but I've already tentatively accepted this unexpected turn into a full-time position." Sliding a prospectus across the table, he responded, "Our offer includes the opportunity to build a publishing department from the ground up. You'd have full autonomy, a team of 5 to start, and the freedom to continue consulting for select clients as long as there's no conflict of interest." I had high suspicions about the consulting arrangements with Baldwin and Harlow Imports. As I was leaving New Summit's offices, my phone buzzed with another call from Monica, which I put on voicemail. A few minutes later, Jessica texted me. "This is incredibly generous. I managed its market rate for someone with your skills and connections. Robert corrected Raymore for underpaying you." This was going more quickly than I had expected, so I called Monica, the executive board, and she told me that Baldwin Tech had officially put all projects on hold while they reviewed the relationship. I needed time to think things through and carefully consider my options, so I spent the afternoon in the Boston Public Garden watching tourists paddle around in swan boats while it had about 3 different options: joining New Summit as an independent consultant, accepting Raynor's apparent rethink, or I'll need 2 weeks to set up my home office and formalize my consulting business, Robert remarked, looking happy. "Perfect, we'll have everything ready." I continued to keep my consulting ties with Baldwin and Harlow, who work for us. When I called Monica last, she picked up on the first ring and said, "Sarah, thank you for calling back. We'd like to bring you in tomorrow to discuss a new role we're creating, a senior client advisor reporting directly to me," she said with a tone of relief in her voice. "The board has approved a significant compensation increase, which is very generous, Monica, she said. But I've accepted a position with New Summit Holdings, and I'll be consulting independently for Baldwin Tech and Harlow Imports. The silence on the outside was deafening. You're working for our clients, Monica finally stammered, with your clients. I gently corrected her, and for the time being at least, they'll continue to use Raynor for production. I'll just be managing the projects from the client side rather than yours, but Monica stopped herself. That's good business. I suggested, finding new perspectives and adjusting to changing market conditions. After another lengthy pause, the board will want to talk with Monica. She said, I'm finally available next week. I responded, but I should note that my consulting fees are much higher than my previous salary. As I hung up, I had no ill will toward Monica or Raymore, just a strange sense of gratitude because getting fired had made me realize my actual worth in a field where connections and knowledge were crucial. 1 month later, I was sitting in my newly created home office, surrounded by neat project files and a cutting-edge computer setup provided by New Summit. On my walls were framed covers of publications I had shepherded through production over the years, a visual reminder of my expertise and that sometimes the best retaliation isn't plotting and scheming, it's just rising. My job at New Summit was going well. I had already put together a talented team and was setting up procedures that would improve their corporate publications. When the doorbell rang, Thomas let a visitor into my office, and I thanked her for coming. Legacy, my consulting business, Ellison Publishing Services, was officially registered with Baldwin Tech and Harlow Imports as my first clients. Sarah, I'll be honest with you, we're struggling without you. Baldwin and Harlow are threatening to pull all future projects from Raymore New Summit. The board is worried. I nodded. Looking uncomfortable in my home space? I asked, pointing to a chair. How can I help you? Monica looked different. Her polished confidence had given way to a harried appearance. I am waiting for her to continue. They asked me to offer you a senior position as Executive Vice President of Client Relations, complete creative control over your department, and a seat on the executive board, but she hesitated. I briefly considered her offer, which would have seemed like a dream promotion just 6 weeks ago. I am truly flattered, I said. But I've learned something interesting about myself, Monica. I actually like the path I'm on, and we can match whatever you're making. I smiled for the first time in 20 years because it's not about the money. I'm creating something that is truly mine. The work I do at New Summit is challenging and creative, and my consulting clients appreciate what I have to offer. I'm afraid there is nothing we can do because Monica appeared deflated, but I'm happy to suggest someone to replace me. Jessica Adams has a lot of potential. Monica nodded in resignation and turned back as she left the room. You know, when I let you go, I thought I was taking a risk that would modernize the 6 months later. I threw a small reception at my house to celebrate the launch of New Summit's redesigned corporate publishing program. Harold Baldwin and Victoria Harlow attended, along with my team from New Summit and a few former Raymore coworkers who had since joined my company. I never thought that I would turn it into an opportunity, so I finished it for her exactly as she said softly, lesson learned. Jessica Adams, who is currently the Client Relations Director at Raymore, was part of the expanding consultancy. Following Monica's sudden departure, the board decided they needed someone who valued relationships over gaudy marketing tactics. I still can't believe how everything unfolded, Jessica said as we stood on my patio, watching the fall foliage. When Monica fired you, everyone believed it was the end of your career. I chuckled, but sometimes the best benefit is being underappreciated. Raymore is still getting better, and she acknowledged that we lost nearly 30% of our clientele. The board has finally realized that in the publishing industry, relationships are crucial. So how are you finding your Thomas joined us, putting a gentle hand on my back and saying, your guests are asking for a speech, he said with a smile. I had never been good at public speaking, but as I glanced around at the group of coworkers who were there, I realized that I had a great mentor who taught me everything I know about client relations. Raised my glass and said, I will offer a toast to unexpected opportunities, to valuing expertise, and to the power of relationships. The group raised their glasses, Harold called out, and Sarah Ellison, who taught us all the importance of relationships, was acknowledged. I felt a surge of confidence that would have been foreign to me a year ago. As the laughter and conversation returned, I paused to consider how completely my professional life had changed. What had started as a devastating dismissal had become something far more fulfilling than I could have ever imagined. Sometimes the greatest retaliation is simply becoming the person you were. The most powerful response to underestimation is excellence. Always meant to be, I finally realized that the real power came from the connections I made and the value I provided along the way, not from the title or the position. Fired worker to a reputable sector. The most rewarding kind of retaliation was the leader of all.